Hello and welcome to a hopefully fairly short review of Marvel Rivals. As a huge hero-based shooter fan, I feel like I should at least give an opinion of my own on what I think about this game. And as usual, feel free to skip to the chapters that interest you the most. This isn't a ramble, so let's go. I have played almost 10 hours of the game at this time, and I feel I have a good understanding of it, or a good enough understanding of it, to give a fair analysis. I have played many hero-based shooters. I've played Apex Legends, Battleborn when that came out, Paladins, which is pretty good, TF2, which was amazing, and I've also played kind of hero shooters, if you're going to count Rainbow Six Siege and Valorant. They got heroes in it, and they shoot, you know. And of course I've played Overwatch, which in my opinion is still on the top all this time. So how does Marvel Rivals do is the question. Well, if you want a quick answer, then here you go. Marvel Rivals is actually pretty good, and I have much hope for its future. However, at this moment, I personally do prefer Overwatch, and I do think it's the superior game holding a slight upper hand for now. Well, I say slight, but yeah, don't get me wrong, this game is good. I would give it a solid 6 out of 10, but I do think that Overwatch is sitting up at 8 or maybe even 9. Don't forget, all opinions, so, you know, this is just how I enjoy the game. But that's my brief opinion. Let's get into some details. So Marvel Rivals launched with 6v6, which I prefer as a format, as it allows you to nestle into a team and play the game to enjoy your own time, rather than having the undue pressure of the team, you know, expecting you to perform to a certain degree. I do generally prefer much larger game formats, since it allows me to very much focus on having fun myself. If I'm a smaller part of the team, I could, you know, mess around a little bit more and focus on fun. Obviously, I'm always trying my hardest to win, but yeah, I don't like the vast amount of pressure and responsibility of my own actions all of the time. I really love teamwork as well, so bigger team formats allows for much greater degrees of teamwork, and I really don't like free-for-all or duels. I just can't perform under that much pressure, where there's just too many people against me at any one time. And so I do like to have that slightly larger lobby, which lets me play the game without worrying too much about my own performance. So let's talk about the gameplay. It's actually very fun. It's nailed the fast-paced action that many of these hero shooters live on. The characters are diverse and they feel very different. It's been very fun to try them all out, and I do find myself playing Strategist the most. Looking briefly at the tanks, or Vanguard as they're called in this game, I feel the game has made the same mistake Overwatch has with tanks. Some of them are well designed, but some of them feel like big meaty DPS units. Obviously, my full understanding isn't here yet, but I feel Thor and Hulk, as two examples, are just big meaty things that roughly leap at you, do damage, and that's essentially it. Whereas Magneto and Penny Parker are much nicer designs in my opinion, with Magneto offering defense for his team and protection, and Penny Parker offering some pretty handy bits of crowd control, whilst also having to create some area denial with her spider webs. The maps look fairly acceptable, but design-wise, I'm not overly impressed with them. They feel somewhat basic in design, and I think that Overwatch's age really shows with its map design feeling much more deeply thought out and certainly superior. Just my opinion, but I do prefer Overwatch's cleaner art style too, but we're going to get to that in just a second. The game is released with some problems, which I'm going to go over here, which in my opinion are stopping it from really competing with Overwatch. The first is that the game seems to be running into all the same problems that Overwatch did. Launching with no role queue was ambitious, but I truly believe some control over what mix of team you end up with is essential to a competitive shooter. I understand that giving players agency to play the game how they enjoy it, and also the different team diversity that you end up with and different gameplay styles that you create with this, is something to, you know, strive for. But that is also how Overwatch started its lifespan, and since role queue was introduced, I do truly believe the game was far more consistently enjoyable for everybody, and you end up with a much more competitive experience where both teams can always feel like they can somewhat compete. And I think that's quite essential if you're doing a competitive shooter. Movement also feels a tad sluggish in Marvel Rivals. Particularly Captain America's sprint, and I really do have to emphasize sprint. It feels very slow and somewhat rubber bandy almost. Iron Man feels like a hot air balloon, as do most of the characters who fly around for a short duration. The speed boosts barely feel like they make much of a speed boost. And I have been playing Cloak of Dagger the most, but she feels like she's going for like a waltz half the time. It's like, come on, we need to get to the front. I wouldn't mind feeling a little bit faster. Aiming feels a tad like I'm on a controller, but I'm thinking that might just be because I haven't fully configured my settings yet, so we'll leave that one just for now. But my biggest problem by far right now is the lack of clarity. Maybe it's because I'm just new, but Overwatch has for a long time avoided visually unclear art. Everything is super clear and super obvious, and there are no blinding effects in Overwatch, not obvious. Everything is very cartoonly, chunky, and coloured in fully. In Marvel Rivals, it feels a bit more chaotic in comparison. There's a constant variation between glaring effects and unclear effects, and it's not incredibly obvious which ones seem to be doing more damage than others. I don't know if this is going to get me flack, but I feel that Spider-Man's little projectile webs are incredibly vague, and when he's popped his ultimate, if he's halfway 5 miles above me, you know, he can still hit you with that ult, the little webs that sort of hit the floor, because I'm not really paying attention to the little white dots that are appearing on the floor around me, right? And so, yeah, I also feel when you die, it's not instantly obvious you're dead. And I do think that it's not really obvious when you're taking damage. I think that these things should be cleared up to make it much more obvious that these things are happening. And particularly the taking damage one. I've been down to half health before I noticed I've actually been, taking damage. Take all of this with a grain of salt, because of course when I first played Overwatch back when it first launched, I thought that was an incredible game and I rated that like 9 out of 10, whereas now I do actually would rate Overwatch Classic at 6 out of 10, the same as this game. So I do think this gun is fun, and I believe it's above average, and I think it has real potential and could very easily overtake Overwatch. But my problem is, Overwatch Classic being 6 out of 10 isn't surprising. I don't think the Blizzard devs even expected it to do that well, because, it just wasn't as well designed as the game is now. And I do think, I made an Overwatch Classic video where I went on about how much the game has improved since then, and it just feels a little bit bad that Marvel Rivals seems to be starting at that point, which is sort of, 8 years too late, right? But yeah, I do believe if the game introduces some artistic clarity, a role queue of some variety, not necessarily a role queue, but role control, some way to verify that you have at least one tank and one healer per game is good enough. Overwatch has been doing lots of experiments with that, Hacked being a good example, a Hacked Kingmaker being a good example, and also some smoother feeling animations and movement would be really nice, and easily I think this game could defeat Overwatch. But for now, especially with Overwatch having its conversation about 6v6 returning, I think I'll stick with Kingmaker. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Adios, chaps.